Hi, and welcome to this webcast about self-organizing teams and how they deal with crisis and change. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which we and you all are joining this session today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Yumi Stamet, and I will be facilitating this session today. I am the co-founder and director of Purpose at Work, and we help organizations put their purpose front and center in how they work with both their clients and their staff. I've been working with organizations that are interested in self-organizing teams in Australian social care since 2015, helping them explore if that would support them in achieving their purpose and living their values. And if that was the case, supporting them to design, pilot, and transition to self-organizing teams. So what we're going to do today is really have a closer look at how self-organizing teams are coping in the current COVID-19 crisis and what the future holds for these teams. Self-organizing teams have gotten increasing interest in the sector. So we're really interested to see how they respond in such unprecedented times. How we will do that is, I'll first give you a bit of an introduction to self-organizing teams and what they are. Maybe you're already familiar with them, but maybe you are not. So that's why we'll go into that very, very shortly. And then we'll look at how they respond to crisis and change. And I'm delighted that two panel members will be here to supporting me with that, being Rosie and Andrew Hyland. They are both CEOs of organizations that have moved into working with self-organizing teams. To give you a short introduction, Avivo provides home care services to people in Western Australia in areas such as aging, disability, and mental health. It has over 1,100 team members and supports per year about 3,000 people to live well in their own homes. Rosie herself has an experience of 40 years in human services and joined Avivo in 2005. Andrew is the CEO of Lifestyle Solutions, and they provide a range of services to over 2,100 people, their families and communities across Australia, in disability and out-of-home care. Andrew has a vast experience of over 25 years with a very diverse background in both financial services, construction, transport, media and telecommunications, utilities, and healthcare. And Andrew joined Lifestyle Solutions in 2016. Once we've heard from this amazing panel, we will then, before we close off, have a quick look at what lessons can we draw from these self-organizing teams and the stories you'll hear from Rosie and Andrew. It's not just for organizations that are interested in self-organizing teams, but also for organizations that are still working with traditional managed teams in how they can pull lessons from how these self-organizing teams have responded to the COVID crisis. So let's start and have a quick look at self-organizing teams. So what are self-organizing teams? They tend to be small, focused teams, small being of a limited number that still has the ability to effectively make decisions. So maybe from up to 12 to 15, around that amount. And they're focused. They tend to be focused around, for example, working in a particular neighborhood, working in a particular residence, working for a particular program that they're delivering. So that's a key point for self-organizing teams. Another key point is that they are empowered by what we call distributed decision-making. This is based on the idea that the competence to make decisions doesn't increase as the position within a hierarchy grows. We believe that everybody is able to make meaningful, good decisions. It's also based on the idea that for empowerment and choice of control of participants, that's actually best served as decisions are made close to the person, their community and their family and carers. and really with them in that moment of service delivery, not centralized in a function with little sight knowledge of the individual's real-time circumstances. A third basis is that the idea that a group actually knows and sees a lot more, and also can come up with a lot more and innovative solutions together than one single manager would be able to do, however competent or experienced they are. A second point that's important for self-organizing teams is that they are motivated by a shared purpose, principles, and values. Clarity of purpose, principles, and values is needed for staff to really see the meaning and the bigger picture of what they're working towards, and also to give them the energy, passion, and direction to work together effectively to achieve the organization's purpose. Self-organizing teams also are guided by the agreed roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities of the team. Again, clarity on these things are really important to guide the team, what they do on a daily basis. In setting these, consider the competencies within each team and look at what could they self-organize, things that they've never done before. So for example, if nobody in the team has ever managed a budget, it's probably not a good idea to set that as one of the first key responsibilities for them to self-organize. Once you've been clear about what their competencies are and what roles and responsibilities come with that, then you really have to give them trust and autonomy to act on these roles and to take on these responsibilities and accountabilities. And as they learn and grow, you can add more. Another important thing for self-organized teams is that they are supported by enabling systems, structure, coaching, learning, and development. It's not that they are self-organizing, that they don't need anything around them anymore, that they can just do whatever. No, they need really clear guidance and systems that help them to do their job well, and structures and coaching to support them and to keep learning and developing as a team. Even very experienced self-organizing teams tend to still have a coach and a learning and development resources so that they can keep developing and be better every day. And a key point that I want to make about self-organizing teams is that they are a means to achieve your purpose. They are not an end in and of themselves. Only if you discover that these teams are the kind of teams that really help you to achieve your purpose, live your values, would I advise you to really look into and consider implementing these in your organizations. So a bit of a general of how self-organizing teams respond to crisis and change. Self-organizing teams can respond to crisis and change quite well because they have that ability to really sense what is happening real time with the people that they are supporting. That sensitivity for what is really happening for each unique individual helps them to find the best possible solution to support people through this crisis and change. Crisis and change are complex environments, and complexity theory learns that in these kinds of environments, what you need to do to respond well is to probe, sense, and then respond. So really try what you could do for a person, for example, sense if that is really making an impact and making a difference for them, and then respond in that way and continue onwards from there. The other thing that makes self-organizing teams able to respond in crisis and change is that they are very adaptable. They are small units, and they only have to look at a small number of participants, not all participants in all your organizations, but a unique set of that. And they tend to know these people really, really well, their unique circumstances. And of course, in a crisis and a change, these unique circumstances also work with that. The crisis of COVID-19 hits participants in many different ways. And that is what the team needs to respond to. And small self-organizing teams are able to do that very quickly. Another element that makes them able to really respond to crisis and change is their resilience. So self-organizing teams are really set up to collectively find solution and be solution focused for the people that they are supporting and the service that they are delivering. So that's a piece where they can really look at what is happening directly with the participants and then finding solutions. How can we support them through the impact of this change and crisis? Another element of their resilience is their capability to really support each other. Self-organizing teams know that to be the best team that they can be, they need to support each other to do their best work. So in a crisis and change, they also turn towards each other and they look out for each other. Because like the COVID-19 crisis, that not only hits participants differently as their circumstances are, but also your staff. And how can they best be supported? Self-organizing teams find that out together, have these conversations with each other, and have multiple people that can then support somebody if they are struggling in the crisis. And of course, the key point for self-organizing teams is that they have this freedom to act on this sensitivity, this adaptability, and through their resilience, have the freedom to act and respond to what is happening directly in front of them without having to wait for guidance and direction from up above as it goes through the lines. So that's a little bit of the theory, but of course we want to hear from Andrew and Rosie how their teams are actually handling this crisis. So Rosie and Andrew, if you welcome, and if you could please join us in this webinar.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Yumi. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Very good. And thank you so much for making time to be part of this webcast. Really excited to hear from you about your teams and how they are going in this COVID-19 crisis. So to help this conversation along a little bit, we put together a couple of questions. And I guess the first two questions are really to get a bit of a sense of what self-organizing teams actually are for you and how they work. So the first question I have for you is, why did you decide to move to self-organizing teams? What was the key reason for you to make this big transition? Because that tends to be what it is. Rosie?
Shall I start? Great. It's great to be here, everybody. Look, Avivo's purpose is to support the active citizenship of everyone, our customers and our employees. And this has been a journey for us for a really long time. It's a real commitment. It's at the heart of the organisation's values. And so we were really looking for some things that would really help that, make that a reality, because it was kind of, we talked about that, we really committed to it. And that's when we came across the component or the ideas of self-organising teams that really seem to be like a core component to support the citizenship, both of our customers and our employees. So, as I said, Avivo's purpose is to support the active citizenship for all within communities. And I want to really stress that. You know, and citizenship isn't about the bits of paper about being who's in and who's out of the country. It's partly that, but there's so much more for us. You know, for Avivo, I think for our whole society, active citizenship is sort of living, working, contributing as active citizens within communities and being active people within our societies. So it means having choice and control and making decisions. We know this is really important for our customers, but it's equally important for the people that do the work with all of our customers. And it's being involved in community, not doing to, and actually participating within that context and taking responsibility for things rather than being told to do things. So that's what that kind of, as we deepen our understanding. So this is something that we saw with self-organising teams as a core component, but I want to stress it's not an end in itself. I think that's one of the things we've learned really on. You've got to keep your commitment is about what you want to achieve as a purpose of the organisation, not self-organising as an end. You know, one of the things we've really learned within that is that our work with people is about relationships and working together and supporting both person to make decisions. So that's why we started on this journey around about 4 years ago.
Thank you, Rosie. Andrew, how about you?
Thanks, Yumi. Thanks, Rosie. That's a great way to start talking about purpose. Lifestyle's purpose is everyone is equal. So we believe that everybody in society and the community should have equal opportunity and equal respect. And our mission is to provide a platform for that to happen. So a bit like what Rosie said, we're not here to do things to people. We're there to support people so they can do things for themselves. So when I joined the organization in 2016, we needed to create a culture that would support that purpose. So that was the first driver. And the second driver was that we needed to be sustainable. So sustainability is financial sustainability, but it's also cultural sustainability. And it's about making sure that we have an organization that can grow itself, that the people can grow themselves to learn, to take on new challenges, to make decisions. So that evolved decision making is really, really important, because we deliver services in the community, as does Avivo, and the people that are in the front line delivering those services must be able to make decisions. There's no point in going to the CEO to ask for a new box of pencils. We need people to be able to have clear accountability and decision-making rights at the front line. So that was really, really important. And the definition that you've given is really good. You know, it's not about, some people think that self-organizing teams is a bit of a free-for-all, a laissez-faire. It's not about that. It's about giving very clear guidelines and goals for people, and then allowing people to make decisions inside that framework. And yeah, but the two drivers, culture and sustainability, that's what drove it for us.
Great, thank you. That's very, very clear. So also for the people who may not know what it looks like in an organization, could you tell us a little bit what self-organizing teams actually look like in your organization? What kind of structure do the teams have, and maybe even what kind of support structures have you got around them?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned, we've been on this journey for about 4 years. Okay, so, and we're not there completely yet. So as you mentioned, Yumi, we actually now employ about 1,200 employees. And I think we have amongst our direct service delivery teams around about 2/3 of the way. Okay, so that gives you some idea. Right at the moment, well, when COVID hit, we had about 64 neighbourhood teams, and they work right across different parts of Perth Metro, and parts of Western Australia. So we're only in Western Australia. And that included really around about 660 employees who are part of those neighbourhood teams. Okay, so we've got, and along with that, so we've got neighbourhood teams, and alongside that, and supporting them, we've got 10 coordination teams, and they're geographically based. They're quite small, and 6 special sort of function teams, which are really specialised services that we provide. Something a bit like nursing is a specialised team. And also some business and organisation support teams like finance, comms and engagement, and the exec team. Okay, so that's a sort of, you know, we're a network of teams that make up the whole community of Avivo. So the structure in the neighbourhood teams is that there are roles like they all share a common purpose, which is around providing great support to people to live life in their communities. The roles, and actually picking up your point, all of our teams are in various points around the development of their autonomy and decision making. And that depends a bit on the skills and the resources in the team, but also because it's been a massive organisational transformation, it's been the readiness of the organisation to support into supporting teams to take up some things. So, but we do have about 6 key roles within each of the teams, so they all provide direct support, and they all take responsibility for providing great support to people. They would work with particular customers, but we're aiming to also have a point. So it's not like every team member goes into every customer, but they would know of all of the customers. The team size ranges between 7 and 10. There's some real outliers to that. When they seem to get over 15, they're way too big. But so we kind of grow, and then how we reconfigure on that. So there is that structure. But the key roles, we've got some cool names, like there's an anchor who is the sort of timekeeper and host of meetings, kind of holds the group with their gatherings. There's a tech talker who's been really beneficial in helping team members to get hold of the technology and make it work for them. We've got a social champion who leads team morale and culture and check-ins and welcomes new members. Another one we have as a role is lifeguard, who leads on safety. And an admin warrior who organises and schedules things and takes the minutes and keeps the actions up to date. And they also have a team tracker, which keeps track of performance, funding, scorecards, those sorts of things. So each of those teams are supported. One of the support structures is to form and develop. We have coaches who really focus on team development and getting the foundations right. We do have roles which we call team facilitators who help from a practical point of view, as well as coordinators and mentors. Okay, so they're all developing the capability and supporting the capability of our teams. We also have specialist support, like I mentioned, with nurses, so nursing team, and also a psychologist, and business support functions, who are teams like sector support, IT, finance, HR, and learning and development, comms and engagement. So they're support structures for the team, and there are a lot of people. But the big other things that you touched on were like, the big thing was IT in people's hands. Mobile phones, we use Microsoft Teams, which has just been fabulous, I have to say, and CRM technology. And a lot of people are using processes like stand-ups, even though you might be sitting down, to be able to get themselves meeting and virtual meetings. So teams have team meetings on a regular basis, and that's shifted with COVID to being, some teams are meeting weekly, some fortnightly. There's also networks between roles, like tech talkers network across the organisation, and there's special interest groups like mental health who have got a passion for a particular field. So that's one example of the special interest groups. Another support structure is actually really regular communications from the organisation. And we also have other structures like operations forum, which actually means it's things to keep an eye of the whole, and teams connect, and leadership forums. So that's basically the structures of Avivo and the kind of things that we're doing to support our teams who are at the front line and working with people and communities.
Great, yeah. So you see that there's actually a lot more to this than just having teams out there. You really need that structure around it. Thank you, Rosie, for explaining how it looks in Avivo. Andrew, what does it look like in Lifestyle Solutions?
Thanks, Yumi, and thanks, Rosie, for that. First of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the process. So the process is really important. We kicked this off in March 2017, so it's it's over 3 years, and we use a participative design process. And what that means is that we genuinely consult with the whole workforce, and we build it from the bottom up. So we actually build the design from the bottom up. But what it also means is that the design keeps changing or evolving. I'm glad to say we're at the very final stages of that design. Not to say there's really no final stage, because in a true participative design approach, the workforce is constantly inputting and we're constantly refining. But I can tell you what the design looks like now, and it's probably pretty close to the kind of target that we wanted to get to. But it's taken us 3 years, and it's because we've had to listen carefully. We cannot possibly know what needs to happen on the front line, so we need people to tell us. So we have 4 groups. So the first group is called Customer Service Delivery, and that's made up of the frontline teams. There's about 80 teams in there. That's been rolled out to 2 states, so Queensland and Tasmania, and we've got 3 to go. I'll explain why we've done it that way in a second. Then the second group is called Service Excellence. So they're specialised teams across child and family disability, clinical and incident management or incident support. They have a slightly higher skill level and a deeper understanding of compliance arrangements and rules and regulations and government requirements and contract requirements. So they're kind of the go-between between the funder and the front line. It's not a hierarchy. They're there to perform a certain role. Then the third, so that group is called service excellence. So you've got service delivery, service excellence. The third group is business support and assurance. And there's 9 teams in that. And that's got teams like safeguarding, talent and diversity, finance, technology. We made some interesting changes in there from a structural perspective. We separated the traditional HR function, which is normally made up of L&D and work health and safety and people support. They're all in very different setups. The safeguarding team is safeguarding for customers and safeguarding for people. So work health and safety goes together. We put practice and learning together. So the practice coaches and the practice experts who really design the ways of working sit together with the learning team so that they're really encouraged to support people through training and education. And then the fourth group is governance and strategy, and that's the executive, the board, and any strategic business growth objects. So they're the four groupings. We started to roll out and deploy in frontline teams, and then we realized that we didn't actually have the business support and assurance functions up and running to support the front line. So we can only go so far. We kind of had a natural limitation, so we had to come back and really get the business support and insurance team set up so that we could continue the journey. So we didn't have enough infrastructure. But would I've done it any differently? Probably not, because you really needed to go out to the front and find out what the issues were and what the challenges were. And we found those, and we said, okay, we need to now come back and we need to redesign the infrastructure of the organization. And then we did that, and there was a bit of confusion there because we were working in, I guess, 2 or 3 different parallel universes for quite some time. And that's one of the challenges, and particularly in a well-established organization that has a hierarchy, it's actually quite difficult to break that down and to pivot. And it is a bit like turning the Titanic around. It's very, very difficult. When people ask me what is self-managing teams, I often say it's the opposite of a hierarchy. So when you take the definition that you gave at the start of your presentation, a lot of hierarchical companies may claim that they do things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but they don't. And the real difference is the hierarchy, because if you take the hierarchy for me creates communication gaps. So communication from me to the organization gets blocked, and communication from the front line to me gets blocked. And that's what happens in a hierarchy. People filter and filter information, and that's what makes it really difficult. So it's it's like a big Jenga puzzle. You've got to start stripping out the hierarchy bit by bit, but you need to have something in place to support it when you're getting there. So the implementation is very, very complex and not to be underestimated, and probably why a lot of people don't do it because it's hard work. And if you do it properly and if you really listen to the people, it's very hard. It's a lot of hard work. So, big shout out to my team who've been working on this for a long time, and we're starting to see we are starting to see the benefits. We're starting to see the culture change in a positive way, and we're starting to see those elements of sustainability coming into play. So the work is definitely paying off, and we've got a much more transparent, open, and communicative culture now.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for sharing that process as well. It sounds very familiar with compared to the organizations that I work with, and I've been in contact with Rosie for quite some time, for years, I think now, Rosie, and I know that it is an iterative process. You start something, you try something, and then really, as you said, you have to listen. You have to listen at what is working, what is not working. And I think everybody at some point comes back and goes like, okay, we need some more structure and more support around this because we thought we got it, but nah. And you really have to start rethinking. I think that's the beauty of both your stories. You really have to start rethinking of what is actually the purpose of this team. You know, as you said, Andrew, you know, an HR team, yeah, it's HR because it's all HR, and you dump all these functions and roles and tasks in there. But if you really start looking at, well, is this really HR, or is it actually more logical to say that, as you said, you know, practice and learning and development should be together, because those are the, you know, that is the real meaning of what we're trying to do here. And
I think there's a really important lesson, because we changed our method many times, and we could have been accused of chopping and changing or making stuff up, but it's not. It's actually genuine evolution. It's based on what we learn. If you want to be a proper learning organization, a responsive organization, you said it in your presentation, you must get the signals, you take that data and you change course, you course correct. There's the old story about the aircraft, and it never goes in a straight line. It has to change its course on the way to its destination, depending on the wind and all the things that are happening. And it's exactly the same, but it's very easy to get locked into your own prophecy and say, well, that's what we said we were going to do. We must continue to do it that way. No, you have to change. You've got to adapt. So I think I like to use the word adapt and evolve, and you've got to constantly do that.
Andrew, I like, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was thinking over the years, I used to think of Avivo a bit like a big old ship. It's actually now, I think I'm beginning to feel it's not a ship. It's much more of a living system, and a bit more dynamic. Maybe I used the analogy the other day. It's a bit more like a reef with a lot of different creatures, and it's actually our job to make sure all the things that make the reef thrive is much more there, and it's got to be much more adaptable and go with what's going there. Well, that's what I'm beginning to, and I'm actually now looking back, beginning to see, I wouldn't describe the Avivo now like an old ship. I'm beginning to see it much more like a flock or something like that, with that kind of moving with where it's going.
Well, I love analogies, Rosie. I probably use
Maybe we should.
But the one I have used is we're like a big A380 plane. It's very heavy. It's got too many seats on it, and we want to change that into a team of fighter pilots. You know, small, agile airplanes that can move very quickly with smaller teams and can respond to different. I'm not quite sure if that's the right analogy, but that's the one I use. So
Great.
Well, given that, I think that's a good segue. You know, if you want to change from something big, you know, whether it's the Titanic or it's a really big plane, to something that's small and adaptable, then I guess a crisis like the COVID pandemic is the perfect test ground to see how adaptable and how able is this group of fighter planes actually to attack that. So I'm very keen to hear from you. How have your self-managed teams been going? And especially because you're both still also on that journey between not fully all teams are being self-managed. You still have some managed teams as well that are working in the more traditional sense. Can you see any differences between that? So how have these teams, how have they responded, and what is the difference with your managed teams?
Yeah, I'll look, actually brilliantly, particularly the neighbourhood teams who are well formed. However, it's almost like COVID has given our organisation a whole newly another stimulus in relation to it. So I am so grateful. I was so grateful over the last couple of months that we'd got so far with the process. So I was so pleased that we had people in teams feeling connected and supported and connected within communities. I was really grateful for the roles being in place and some of the foundational work that had been there, and especially with their new sense of autonomy and making things work, taking responsibility. And really, grateful for the technology that we had taken, the big steps being put in place to be able to support teams with their works. Look, I was reflecting what you were saying. I think COVID's given us an opportunity to really test whether we can work to our purpose and values, and really interesting. And we're taking a bit more time because we're very fortunate in Australia, and even more fortunate in Western Australia with the flattening of the curve. But we're really being able to have a look and see what's going on, and people are incredibly that feel like they've done their best work. So that's what I would say was and it's interesting looking at your dot points. I saw teams, we've seen teams, they took real leadership and responsibility for supporting and protecting our communities. So that was them, each other, but also and of course their colleagues, but the wider community as well. So I think we might have all seen that sort of real turning towards community as coming out of COVID. But they understood the need for hygiene and social distancing and protecting vulnerable customers, but also vulnerable employees who were in the particular target groups, and helping customers to deal with the whole situation. So that's one of that part. The other thing, I think the teams really strengthened their connection. So that it was almost like the situation meant that they really stepped into mutual support and exercising their autonomy. The things around how they could help each other, help each other out. If somebody had kids that were now having to be at home, all those sorts of things was much stronger. The roles I mentioned earlier on, they actually seem to get really invigorated. So, the lifeguard got very passionate around the PPE, and that was damn frustrating because we weren't necessarily, I think the whole of Australia wasn't very well prepared with PPE, but, they really took it on board to make sure that the connection was there, that wherever possible, supporting their colleagues with PPE. The anchor, who is the person who often hosts the meetings, really, we all moved to virtual meetings, and they really stepped into that role and kind of got their real mojo associated with their particular role. So we saw that roles were really invigorated with really clear purpose and energy associated with COVID. But most importantly, they really demonstrated an innovative and flexible and quality support to customers. They looked for different ways of helping people. I mean, we continue to provide, we had a whole range of responses, as you can imagine, with the diversity of our customer group. We provide a lot of essential services, but we also provide things in people's homes. Some families decided they'd take back all the support for a period. Other people couldn't do that. So we had a whole range of situations, and the teams were really flexible in responding to that. They really got on to learning new ways of supporting people. So they sort of take up on virtual support over the phone, how they could build social distancing into doing support in the home and in the community. It stretches your mind a bit. So they really grasped opportunities to provide support in different ways. And they also used time, because we did get cancelled services, but they used time wherever they could to there's probably more training done over this period. The nursing team was fabulous with connecting with teams and supporting them with questions, and other online training was provided. But I think the things I am proud of the whole organisation was that we really seemed like we had steady leadership, but saying those things, which is so important with these kinds of teams, which is we trust you to make decisions about what's going to work, and we've got your back. That was the other thing. So we made a decision early on to provide paid COVID leave, which really went a long way in supporting our colleagues and showing that we were there by them. We really worked hard at being transparent and sharing as many decisions, the things we did and didn't know, out with them with transparency and with with transparency and frequently. So we really geared up our communications. That was really important, both to employees and also to customers on a regular basis. During the peak part of it, we were doing 4 to 5 communications a week, one per day. It's dropped back from that now, and being really connected with it. And we actually saw better connections with the whole organisation, the back office, the coordination teams with the neighbourhood teams. Like that. So it's like everybody coming around and doing, what can we do? What can we do to serve you? I think we have, as I said, a number of teams that are not in neighbourhood teams, and they are more managed. to a greater or lesser extent. We probably saw them struggling a bit more because they didn't have this team structure set up and the roles and the technology in the same place, same space. So we quite quickly tried to get them in place. They didn't go into neighbourhood teams, but we actually tried to get them set up with Microsoft Teams, and they've actually been loving that. So it's almost like it's given us a boost for people seeing, whereas a bit more like, we're not going to go to that working locally thing, are we? But I'm hoping that there's going to be more energy for seeing the real benefits that have come out of it. So yeah, brilliantly. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Andrew, I'm really keen to hear from you as well. How did your teams go?
Well, a very similar experience. I think the stimulus was very positive for us. It gave us a purpose to move with speed and clarity and precision. So a bit like the fighter pilot analogy, but it really did, and it was so important. It was so important to get really clear communication really quickly out to all people. And I think the team demonstrated great leadership on that, but it also demonstrated the value of the infrastructure. It actually showed, I guess it demonstrated to the front line what the leadership team are there for, to support them. So it actually demonstrated the infrastructure as being a supporting vehicle rather than a managing vehicle. So it actually demonstrated all the values of self-organizing teams. So we moved very, very quickly. We had very, very clear protocols. Staff felt very encouraged by the clarity of what we were saying, because remember, at this time, it seems like a long time ago, I think it was 7 weeks now, there were so many mixed messages coming out from government, everybody trying to do the right thing, but the information was changing daily. And a bit like Rosie, we made some very, very quick decisions around things like leave, around supporting people, PPE, all of those things we put in place really quickly. And I think people felt we're getting really supported. We've got really clear messages from the team. We know exactly what we should and shouldn't do. So they could actually get on with it and do the real work of supporting the people that we support. So they felt, and I have direct feedback on this, they felt supported and they felt that they could get on with their role. So I think it was a good stimulus. Of course, we wouldn't wish this event on anybody again, but it did demonstrate our preparedness for something like this. And it was like we kicked into fifth gear and everything just clicked into place. People use the technology. I think productivity has gone up by about 20%. That's an anecdotal, but I feel it. I just feel it, because I feel like we are getting through so much more. We're getting through decisions much more quickly. And there's a sense of purpose, clarity, speed. They're kind of the three words that you find there's a real sense of purpose around this crisis. Now, the next pivot for us, of course, we pivoted out from the idea of this being a crisis probably, 3 weeks ago, and we're starting to move into the new normal. I haven't mentioned communication, but yeah, communicate until you're sick of hearing the message, and then it's getting through. And it was a little bit like that, but we really did. We introduced a lot of things very, very quickly, and people's response to that have been good.
Great, wonderful, and it's. I guess it is really showing what self-organizing teams can do, but not just the teams. It's the whole structure around it as well that is so important in this. And yeah, I can tell anecdotally that I'm hearing that from other organizations as well, that the stimulus, if they're on this path, they actually see more maturity in self-organizing in their teams through this whole circumstance. So that's amazing. Very last question: what's next for your teams? What do you feel? How will they, for example, navigate out now that restrictions are being lifted? Of course, in WA, much more so than in some of the states that you work in, Andrew. But how will they continue? What is next for them going out of this? Rosie?
Yeah, well, we are providing clear boundaries of what to do and when. So the structure is supporting that, and there is quite a strong, actually hearing from the teams. They're really committed to their customers and ensuring caution and the health and safety of everybody. So they seem to be, so we are, the organisation is making decisions about being cautious, and about when vulnerable employees will begin providing direct services again, travel in cars, access to the community, to do that really safely, working from home. So we are making decisions as a whole around that, rather than just anybody making decisions about where that goes. I think the teams, though, as we're also seeing, because we are still in transition for the whole, we are seeing some benefit, and the teams are looking at right now, because of the way they've kind of reconfigured some of their work, about how they can keep building on that and keeping to smaller teams, working more locally right across. So some of those things, we're looking at the opportunity now to keep on building on that. We are planning about how to return vulnerable employees, and we're also taking steps about how do we they're making steps about how they start providing community support. And one of the really exciting things that a lot of the teams have got a lot out of, and is about supporting people with other means other than direct support, so utilising phones and IT, and actually going forward, probably helping customers to be even more ready for that if and when they need it, or actually it suits them to have that kind of support. So they're looking at all those sorts of things. But in closing, I think what we've seen is that the experience has been invigorating for everybody. And we've seen teams developing more autonomy. It's pushed the organisation's understanding and brought home a bit more about our need to trust and provide flexible solutions to teams, because there were some things that were quite hard to do, as we were trying to be really, let's just try and have the can-do attitude, but sometimes it's been, oh God, this is hard doing can-do, because our systems are fairly rigid. We've actually also, it's been one of the wonderful things seeing the whole community actually seeing the value of our support workers and other care workers. And I think we're at a critical time, and actually our sector needs to do something. Well, we're going to do something about it. Actually, how do we these are essential workers, and they do brilliant work, and they're very talented, and they are so committed to people living in communities that, they need to be continued to be appreciated. And the other thing I think is we've learned a lot about how Avivo is as a whole community. And as we go, because we got through COVID, the initial wave, we've got a whole lot of stuff to come. And particularly what's going to hit communities. Like, okay, it's not going to be great if we get a second wave of actual infection, but what about all the economic impact? And so I think we're coming to a point now, we've really seen something wonderful with the first part, but how do we really continue to build on this and really connect with communities as citizens, with our customers, with our colleagues, to be able to really take on the hard months ahead and support our communities into the future. It's me.
Great. Lots to do, but exciting times.
A lot more to come, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, how about your teams? What is next for them, and how will they navigate the next few phases?
So very much looking at the positives, looking at the opportunities, looking at what has worked well, what has served us well through the past 6-7 weeks, and which bits of that can we take forward as the way of doing, as the way of operating. And I've already started to ask people in my weekly note or video. I do a video now to people every week, just a small 1-minute grab, and I've started to ask people to tell me what they would like to see us to continue. And I'm probably considering surveying people as well to get a sense, because I think some of the things that might work for me may not be working for other people. So I think there is a bit of a we've got some people who don't like to work from home, for example, because they haven't got the setup, or they haven't got the conditions to be able to work from home. So they get a bit cranky if they can't go to the office. But we also have to manage the social distancing rules and so on. So we're trying to But really, again, it's about consulting with the people and using this as an opportunity to talk to our workforce, to talk to the people who work with us, to say, okay, what's working, what's not, and how do we bring that forward? Of course, we will be carefully managing the transition back in with the same clarity and focus that we managed the shutdown. And it feels a bit more challenging, I think. It feels a bit more, it feels harder to come out than it was to go in. It was, you know, because decisions just had to be made. So it's quite an interesting feeling at the moment that there's a degree of tentativeness in the rebuild, and everybody's a bit nervous about turning on the full throttle too quickly, because if we have to turn it off again. So that's a real you know, discerning thought process at the moment, and it's I would probably say tentative. I don't think we can move with the same speed. We're kind of watching it, but we just need to carefully manage that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much both for sharing you know, how your teams are going, what the structure is, and for taking the time to do that. I guess in closing, because we are running a bit out of time, you know, what kind of lessons, I guess, could organizations that are still in, you know, traditional teams working in a way, what I'm taking away from this really is that clarity of purpose that your teams have, so clear on why they are there. They're not there to, you know, to make it easier on themselves. They're really there for community. And that the structures that you have built around that, for that to allow that to happen, so that you can base your response to what is exactly happening in those communities that these teams are so connected to. So listening what's happening on the ground and letting them make decisions to do that. And I think even if you are in a managed team, you know, and you work in a hierarchy, there is still so much to learn by simply going to your teams and listening to what is really happening at that front line, and what is working and what is not working, being adaptable in that space. I guess it's also that communication that you talked about, being really focused, giving a lot of clarity, but also that connection for teams, you know, supporting them to support each other, and helping them to do that. Having, again, these structures in place, even the technology that was mentioned, whether you work with MS Teams or any other kind of platform, being able to actually be connected, and I guess use that collective knowledge, experience, skill within the team to shape the response and come up with the best possible solutions for each and every neighborhood, each and every community, each and every service type, and then seeing how they can adapt to this. And I think it's beautiful. I get what you said, Rosie, that your nursing team actually, you know, also switched to supporting the teams and always became a resource for them to be able to work better and to get what is important in this space. And really to let your purpose and your values guide that response. You know, in this crisis, there is no rule book. You know, there is no practice standard really, but it is your purpose and your values that guide how are we going to respond? What is actually the best way that keeps it real for us and keeps it real for the people that we're supporting? And yeah, and these roles that you've got, structures, and I really do have the same hope, Rosie, that through this there will be a lot more, I guess, acknowledgement of the amazing people that work in the front line, their skill, their experience, their commitment, their passion for their own communities, and that is essential. They are not just an essential workers in this COVID-19 crisis, but they are essential workers for each and every community. So anything that you want to add to that, Rosie or Andrew?
No, it's just been lovely to connect with you, to hear where you're at, Andrew. Great progress, and to connect in with it. It's been really lovely to reflect for today. And it's going to be very interesting in the months ahead.
Yeah, same here, Rosie. It's been a while since I visited you in that office. I can
You can see it.
Yes, but
I had to
hopefully,
come in here today because my Wi-Fi connection isn't too stable at home, so I'm thinking I can't cope with that. So
yes. No, it's great. It's great to connect, and it's great to see people going through this journey. It is not easy to set these types of conditions or frameworks up in organizations, particularly if it started from a position of hierarchy. But
yeah,
it goes to show you, in a crisis situation, anything's possible. I think we were both very well prepared for this kind of thing, but I'm sure other organizations who maybe set up a little bit more hierarchical probably were able to cut through a lot of stuff as well. Certainly, most of the people I'm speaking to have had similar type experiences. So, you know, now's the opportunity to not waste the crisis.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rosie and Andrew, for your contribution to this session. Lovely to see you both. Lovely to hear about how your teams are going. For everybody who's listening or watching this, hope you got something out of this. Please take the note that we're not saying that you should all move to self-organizing teams now, because as you heard from Rosie and Andrew, this takes an enormous amount of effort, an enormous amount of time that probably most organizations don't have in this current crisis. But hopefully you did get something out of it that you can take back to your own organization, and use that enormous potential that you've got within your teams to really respond well to what is happening on the ground, what is happening in your communities. So thank you very much, everybody, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Yumi.